Traders, how are you? With Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Record highs for Bitcoin at 100K, record highs for stocks, and a brand new war in Syria. Let's go ahead and get started. Wednesday, all-time highs for U.S. indexes. We had a situation where obviously we have the Trump bump, right? There's a lot of optimism about what Trump's going to do, the deregulation with Elon Musk, Vivek, Doge, and the other things as well. But there was also good news on the tech front. A lot of tech companies are talking about how the AI boom is going to boost their results. Every stock market was up in the U.S. except for the Dow. They did hit all-time highs on Wednesday, all three of the exchanges. In the Communist Republic of Canada, they went up by 0.16%. One thing that I thought was hilarious was there was a meeting, supposedly, between Trudeau and Trump. Trudeau is the grand dictator of the Republic, the Communist Republic in Canada. And Trump told them that, well, you guys should just become the 51st state if you guys are going to be subsidized and we're going to be sending you so much money. He said the same thing about Mexico. Anyway, overseas market news, the European markets were mostly higher. The DAX, the Spanish markets, Italy, they were all up in the high 3% positive territory. Latin America was mostly mixed. The largest exchange there in Latin America being Brazil, the Bovespa, they were up 0.22%. Middle East and Africa, mostly higher as well. South Africa was the biggest winner there. And then in the far East, Asia, Australia, that whole area, whole market's mostly higher. The TAIEX in Taiwan, that was up 4.18%. Bitcoin, big news, hit 100,000 for the first time. Officially hit 103,000 so far this week. But for the week, it did end a little bit lower at 99,458. For the week, it's 3.32%. Obviously, there's a situation where Trump is a pro-crypto candidate. So now things are kind of rolling, especially since he's expected to announce. Actually, he already did announce David Sachs as the crypto czar. He even talked about putting a U.S. government reserve in Bitcoin as well. Commodities and energy, crude, both the U.S. and international were down over 1% for the week. The U.S. hit 67.20, while the international Brent hit 71.12. The U.S. is down over 4% the last month, while the Brent is down 3.86% over the last month. Gold and silver both getting a lot of selling pressure. For the week, gold was down 0.63 to $2,633.50. So far, best year for gold since 1979. Silver was up 1.14% at 31.04. And one of the things that are happening is with the optimism with the upcoming Trump administration, the dollar is starting to go, much higher. And so since we have the majority of the world that most of the commodities, raw materials are in dollars, when you have a situation where the U.S. dollar goes up significantly, there should be an inverse relationship with a lot of these materials since they're listed in dollars. Financial and banking news, South Korea's inflation rate climbed to 1.5% after hitting a 45-month low in October. On Tuesday, the won, which is the currency from South Korea, fell sharply against the U.S. dollar after the president declared an emergency martial law. So now there's a big fiasco happening between the parties and everything in South Korea. So we'll see how that turns out. India's central bank kept the benchmark interest rate unchanged at 6.5% on Friday. They're still struggling with a bit of inflation, in addition to hurting growth in the third largest economy in Asia. I believe they're the fifth or sixth largest economy in the world now. They overtook the UK already. In economic news, over the weekend, the PMI, which is the manufacturing index for China, rating for November, hit its highest level since April. So that's good economic news finally for China. And the manufacturing sectors in both the EU and the UK showed more weakness in November. The European manufacturing index showed the fastest deterioration since, looking at the date here, give me a second, August 2020. Germany and Austria were the biggest losers there. And economic data released on Tuesday showed that the U.S. job openings in October compared to September were much higher than expected. They had 7.7 million openings compared to the expected 7.5. And obviously that's good news for the central bank, which means that they might not lower interest rates as fast as we want them to. Remember that the interest rates are the single most important thing in the U.S. economy. It's almost 70% consumer spending. And since most of us all spend with our credit card, buy houses with debt, buy cars with debt, the interest rates are super, super important. Quarter 4 growth in the U.S. economy looks stronger than expected. They're expecting 3.3%. That's over the last 3 months of the year, basically. One of the things I keep thinking, though, is it kind of seems like this is really smooth sailing ever since Trump won the election. Even how he won, it just kind of, too big to rig, as he said. But it kind of seems to me that what's going to happen is as soon as he gets into election, they're just going to literally pull the rug out from the economy, and they're going to try to destroy everything like they're doing right now in Syria. India's economy grew by only 5.4% this year compared to 6.5 expectation, slowest pace in nearly 2 years. We have a lot of economies around the world starting to slow down, and the U.S. retail sales, which is what I mentioned about the consumer spending. So the U.S. economy is almost 70% consumer spending. The U.S. retail sales, which is consumer spending, excluding automotive, increased 3.4% on Black Friday compared to last year's. Although, if you really consider it, if our inflation rate is 3-4% or so, 5%, depending what they're reporting, even though it's a lot higher than what they report, in reality, if it only went up by 3.4%, that means that people are spending more money, but not as much as they did last year. Because theoretically, if inflation is 3-5%, and over the last year, it was 8-9%. Right in the beginning of this year, it was 5, 6, 7. That means that the prices went up, but the number of sales didn't go up by the same amount of inflation, which means that the sales aren't up. See how that makes sense? Apparel, jewelry, and electronics were the top gifts. In political news, Trump met world leaders at the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral in France. He met with kings, queens, presidents, a lot of people. Biden also announced $1 billion for, I believe it was Angola in Africa, while North Carolina hasn't received almost any help from the federal government to rebuild after their communities were absolutely destroyed in a 1,000-year flood. And Romania's top court annulled the ongoing presidential election due to accusations of Russians meddling. So that's how democracy works in Europe. When their guy doesn't win, it's somebody else's fault, and you got to redo the election. See how that works? Tesla slipped 1.59% after a Delaware judge blocked the reinstatement of CEO Elon Musk's $56 billion pay package. Remember, he literally works for $1. And the only way he gets paid is if Tesla reaches certain milestones based on what was done with the board of directors. And now they're probably going to appeal. It's going to end up in the Supreme Court. And most likely there's going to be a judgment that's going to affect a lot of public companies around the world. Microsoft on Tuesday was accused of unfairly overcharging customers and rival cloud companies in the UK in a lawsuit of more than $1.2 billion. And the world's fourth largest car company, Stellantis, this includes, GM, Chevy, all these companies, Jeep. I don't believe GM is in there, so sorry about that. But their shares were down over 6%. Their CEO abruptly stepped down, saying that he didn't agree with executives and board of directors, and they are not doing well when it comes to sales. So some of the brands that they have probably aren't going to survive this next recession. And in international events, Syrian has officially fallen. Assad has left. And now Syria is most likely going to end up like most other Middle Eastern countries, which is not going to get better. The problem we have with Iran, that was after a revolution that the U.S. did. Iraq, Egypt, Lebanon, so on and so forth. So now Israel has begun bombing air and military bases, defense systems, intelligence facilities, essentially bombing them back to the Stone Age. And we're probably going to see a massacre of Christians, considering that they're about 10%, a huge minority in the country. So pray for Syria, because now we're going to have probably another huge load of migrants coming both to the U.S. and Europe as well. That's your news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.